Whiteness, right, is under threat. The demographic shifts. The country isn't what all of these racially ambiguous children on Cheerios commercials.
People are losing it on live TV at truly unprecedented rates. I'm Brad Polumbo, and welcome back to the Brad vs. Everyone podcast, where we take on the craziest ideas from across the internet and across our politics, all from an independent perspective. Today, we're checking in on more media meltdowns, a disturbing free speech story, and TikTokers cutting off their family over politics. First, guys, a quick note. Happy birthday to me, myself. I am now 27 years old and officially feel old. Also, remember last week we talked about the floods that are hitting people in Spain, and there's been so much tragic destruction. I'm going to include a link in today's show where people can donate if they want to help support the recovery over there. Now it's time for another live TV meltdown, because this woke professor just melted down on live TV. Take a listen to this clip of Eddie Glaude Jr., a Princeton professor who was on MSNBC with Stephanie Ruhle and had this explanation for Trump's victory.
There's this sense, right, that whiteness, right, is under threat. The demographic shifts. The country isn't what all of these racially ambiguous children on Cheerios commercials are confusing the hell out of me. Right?
Eddie, a lot of people voted because their life's too damn expensive, and it was here, and it.
They voted for. You're telling me, Stephanie, that all of these people who believe that their lives are, that bread is too high and eggs are too high, that they voted for a convicted felon, a guy who said we can grab the pea.
I think that a lot.
They voted for this guy.
I'm not defending it, but I think there are tons of people that don't pay attention to, and I'm not defending it, don't pay attention to politics at all. But while we live in the most prosperous country in the world, people are saying, life's not fair, I'm not doing well, my son's still living in the basement, I can't seem to get a job, I don't like the status quo, I'm voting for something else, and he was the person.
I love you to life,
I love you,
but I do not believe that. I cannot believe that. And the reason I think you believe it is because you don't want to believe that that's what's really motivating them. It's always the case. People don't want to believe what the country actually is, because if they believe it, they're going to have to confront what's in them. I don't believe that. They voted for a crook, a person who they know is stealing from, just doing everything to undermine the so-called country that they love. And then they're telling us the BS that it's economics. We know that's not true.
The so-called country? Is he saying America's not a legitimate country now? I mean, look, you know you've absolutely lost the plot when you've gone so mad, so woke, so left-wing on MSNBC that the host has to talk you down and try to talk some sense into you. But this whole rant is just absolutely insane from top to bottom. Firstly, if your explanation for why Trump won boils down to people wanting to preserve whiteness, that's going to totally fail to explain why such an increasing share of minority voters, especially Hispanic people, voted for him. It's obviously not all about race whatsoever, especially considering because a huge chunk of white people voted for Kamala. The gap has far more to do with divides in education and class than it does with race. But left-wing academics really only seem capable of viewing our society through this one-dimensional, identity-obsessed lens. And what is he on about Cheerios commercials with multiracial children? Nobody, except maybe 5 people in Alabama, gives 2 hoots about that. You have to be pretty detached from actual Trump voters or just the broader American public to think that that kind of thing is a driving issue for people these days. And then his whole rant about people not actually caring about the economy or the cost of living, even though that's like one of the top things they say they care about, is totally missing the mark. He brings up a bunch of completely irrelevant and unrelated stuff, like Trump being a felon, which only refers to bookkeeping offenses by a highly partisan New York DA that are potentially going to be overturned anyway, and old comments he made that are really gross about grabbing women. But what does that have to do with the economy. Like, the math is not mathing. If people remember correctly that the economy was strong and their life was affordable when he was president last time, and they want to go back to that, they're overlooking the many personal flaws this man has and the many, I think, suspect things in his past and baggage and comments he's made. They're overlooking that and saying they care more about the actual things affecting their family, making them struggle to feed their family and put food on the table. What one has to do with another, I just don't see. And he's really telling this woke MSNBC host that she's just in denial because she doesn't want to admit how fundamentally evil and racist America is. And that we all just want to preserve whiteness is why minority voters increasingly backed Trump. Bruh. You know, there's a saying, and I can't remember it exactly, but it goes something like, some ideas are so crazy, only an intellectual could believe them. And when I see professors from America's most prestigious, at least supposedly, institutions like Princeton coming on national television and having these kinds of hysterical meltdowns that are just totally detached from reality, I'm more convinced than ever by the truth of that statement. Meanwhile, over on CNN, a former Kamala official just floated the craziest and most offensive feminist idea that I've ever heard. Take a listen to this clip.
He is looking for. That is my question. I'll start with you.
Joe Biden's been a phenomenal president. He's lived up to so many of the promises he's made. There's one promise left that he could fulfill, being a transitional figure. He could resign the presidency in the next 30 days, make Kamala Harris the president of the United States.
Whoa.
He would absolve her from being able to from having to oversee the January 6th transition, right, of her own defeat. And it would make sure that it would dominate the news at a point where Democrats have to learn drama and transparency and doing things that the public want to see is the time. This is the moment for us to change the entire perspective of how Democrats
Okay, this
operate.
is now jumped from an internet meme to a Sunday morning show.
Jamal's out here right now.
Congratulations.
Season of House of Cards.
I thought you were going to say, what about the Supreme Court? That's also out there.
Well, the Supreme Court might happen. I don't know if it will.
Wow. This is the most pathetic suggestion I've heard on cable news in a while, and that's saying something. I love this. Biden should resign the presidency, not because he's mentally invalid and feeble and walks around looking like he doesn't know where he is half the time. They don't care about that. But progressive commentators want him to resign the presidency so that he can make Kamala Harris the president for a couple days symbolically to shatter the glass ceiling or whatever. But at the same time, and even though they picked her specifically because she was a woman as vice president, if you dare say Kamala's ascent had anything to do with DEI, that is so racist and offensive. Personally, I have no problem whatsoever with having a woman president. To me, it makes no difference either way, whether a presidential candidate is male or female. But I think it would be so incredibly condescending to women to basically give a pity presidency to a failed presidential candidate in order to shatter that glass ceiling for women. Like, don't you maybe think the first woman president should be someone who actually earns the presidency? I don't know. I want to hear from the women in my audience. Like, do you support this? Or do you find this as insulting as it seems to me from obviously an outsider's perspective? Like, if I was Kamala, I wouldn't want that. I wouldn't want a pity appointment to be a token footnote in history just for my identity or whatever, after I massively failed to succeed on my own merits, both as a presidential candidate in 2020 and then as a major nominee in 2024. If the Democrats did go down this route, and I am skeptical that they actually will, but it's wild to see high-level people on that side suggesting this seriously, non-ironically, not as a joke, then it would totally embody their move away from meritocracy and towards toxic identity politics and tokenism that the American people have overwhelmingly rejected. They would be learning the exact opposite of the lesson they should be internalizing right now and reminding us of everything that's wrong with the modern Democratic Party. But other than that, go for it, I guess. What do you guys think of this crazy idea and of the MSNBC segment we talked about? Do let me know in the comments, and do hit that like button while you're at it. Remember, guys, to comment with your thoughts, because I do read the comments and I take the time to respond to some on every episode. Plus, if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll definitely respond to it on tomorrow's show. And now we got to talk about another crazy campus censorship story. Because this college just silenced a detransitioner who wanted to speak about their experience leaving the transgender movement. This key story is being highlighted by my friends over at FIRE, the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, where, disclosure, I do some consulting work. They report that the free speech promises are out of tune at Berklee College of Music after the indefinitely postponed event featuring detransitioner awareness. Dylan Lasky reports that administrators have postponed the event following backlash from the campus community. So that whole listen to trans voices thing sure went out the window quick when it's a formerly trans voice. Let's get some more details from Fire. Disharmony and discord permeated the Berklee College of Music campus when an event organized by Simon Amaya Price titled Born in the Right Body, De-Sister and Detransitioner Awareness was indefinitely postponed due to backlash from the campus community. This topic held personal significance for Amaya Price, a desister, someone who once identified as transgender, but later reconnected with their biological sex. Amaya Price went through all the appropriate channels to get this event approved, but the mob still came for him anyways. Scheduled for October 20th, Amaya Price planned the event as part of his class project for Berklee's Songwriting and Social Change course. He voiced that Born in the Right Body was meant to raise awareness of trans desisters and detransitioners, the issues they face legally, societally, and medically, and foster open dialogue and debate. The horror. This clearly sounds like a hate event. Basically the KKK. Amaya Price even went to Berklee's Office of Diversity and Inclusion for funding for the event, and October 15th, he got it, along with permission to use the office's logo in marketing materials. But once Amaya Price began advertising, things quickly took a turn for the worse. So clearly, the event wasn't that bad if the frickin' DEI office approved it. But then came the on-campus outrage and the online mob campaign. Individuals on Instagram said they were going to throw expired groceries at him, demanded that he be kicked out of the school, and told him he should be, quote, scared to host the event. Well, don't they sound lovely? Students also got nearly 2,000 signatures for an online petition urging the college to cancel the event, claiming it was expected to harm the mental well-being of individuals in the transgender community. I'm sorry, was somebody going to force these people to attend this event at gunpoint? If you don't like it, if you don't want to hear what they have to say, just don't go. How does that affect you at all? I will never understand this bizarre and perverse notion that people are traumatized by other people in a place they don't have to be, saying things that if they heard them, which they don't have to, would hurt their fifis. Give me a break. Transgender students at Berklee College of Music are grown adults, and they should have enough emotional resilience to tolerate the fact that somebody might talk about something that they don't agree with or like somewhere else in a place they aren't. Like, welcome to the real world, dear. And also, detransitioner awareness is not even inherently anti-trans. Like, detransitioners exist and are real and are valid, and maybe this event, I don't know the specifics of it, maybe it was going to be anti-trans in some way, but I'm not going to assume that. Regardless, though, just talking about the experiences of detransitioners and the struggles they face in the medical system and the lack of awareness about their plight, all of that, even if you're a pro-trans person, seems perfectly compatible with that it's not for everyone and some people are failed by the system. But no, even mentioning this possibility gets you attacked viciously by the trans community, which, or at least activists and online transgender crowds, right? I don't want to say all trans people attack detransitioners. That's not true. Many, including my friends, actually uplift them and try to help them. But the online activist trans community viciously attacks these people just for speaking about their experience. And all this from the speak your truth crowd, like, until it's inconvenient, I guess. Now, the fact that students threw a little fit and a temper tantrum and tried to get this event canceled doesn't surprise me. And frankly, doesn't even work me up that much because it's just a day that ends in Y on an American college campus these days, unfortunately. What maddens me is that administrators caved to this lunacy. On October 17th, Amaya Price met with Berklee Vice President and Executive Director Ron Savage, who recommended postponing the event for safety reasons and promised to help Amaya Price find a different venue. Oh, so caving to violent mobs and threats. Nice job. But it actually gets worse. Instead, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion posted to its Instagram that the event will no longer take place as planned and will not be sponsored by the office. Then, on October 21, the event was indefinitely postponed, aka canceled, censored, banned. All this at a college that, while it is a private institution, not a public government school that's technically bound by the First Amendment, does still promise its students freedom of expression and open debate. As Fire reports, according to its standards of conduct, one of Berklee's fundamental values is respecting the creative expression of all, Berkeley also makes clear that it does not engage in censorship nor obstruct the free exchange of ideas. Yeah, so much for that, I guess. Nevertheless, by placing alleged safety concerns without even citing or addressing specific threats over its commitment to free expression, the school did just that. By permitting a contentious event only so long as it does not upset campus members, the administration is allowing a heckler's veto due to the potential for disturbance. Yeah, this warning from fire is exactly right. Campus administrators basically just gave the green light to mobs of students that if they throw a big enough fit, they can get any event or speaker canceled. And yet, this is supposed to be a campus with open dialogue and discourse. Sure, Dan. Even from the perspective of left-wing students or trans activists on campus, this is a terrible and misguided thing to do. Because guess what? If you want to bring your radical pro-trans speaker to campus next semester, other students who disagree with it can just make a petition and launch some vague threats and get the whole thing scrapped potentially as well. Like, this is not a game you should want to play. Undermining the rights of your political or intellectual opponents undermines your rights as well. I don't know how people across our politics just so constantly fail to understand this basic fact, this basic truth, this basic principle. I find it so absurd and so hypocritical that people in the trans movement or people who are allies would seek to silence and shut down detransitioners when their experience is valid and important and real as well. And I understand that these issues are contentious, but we're not going to get any closer to the truth or finding some sort of compromise or reasonable position on this stuff unless we have open discourse and debate. If extremists on one side try to shout down, cancel, or censor the opposition, that opposition isn't going to go away. It's just going to go exist in more extreme echo chambers and come back with a vengeance and an even more extreme version. This whole thing is such a disaster. And frankly, I'm not convinced that private colleges should be allowed to do this and still receive all the massive taxpayer funding that they do. Obviously, they are private institutions, so if they want to censor their students, technically that's their right. But it wouldn't be unreasonable, in my view, for us to attach some sort of protections or guarantees for free speech to federal funding for higher education and say, hey, you can take this money or you cannot. And there are some colleges like Liberty, like Hillsdale, a couple that don't take any federal funding, I believe. But if you take the money, you have to respect your students' basic civil rights, their basic human right to freedom of expression. I don't know. I feel like that's not too much to ask, but maybe I'm the crazy one. You guys let me know in the comments below. And now it's time for Brad versus TikTok, my daily segment where I take on the craziest ideas from the Clock app.
Pronoun of the day is slugs.
Today, these TikTok influencers are cutting off their families over politics, and it's unhinged, but also really sad. Up first, we've got one woke white woman who wrote in her caption, "Went no contact from my parents because they voted for Mango Mussolini, who wants me dead." Off to a great start.
So last night, I told my mom and dad that because they voted for someone who wants me dead, that they no longer have the privilege of having their daughter and their granddaughters in their life.
Donald Trump does not want you dead. Get a grip. And it's so toxic to not just cut off your parents, but also deny your kids their grandparents over these petty differences and your own intolerance.
And I told them, never contact me again. I'm never calling you. I want nothing to do with you. And take me out of the will. I have a younger brother who is also a MAGA. I said, when you guys pass away, give him the entire house. I don't want to inherit your house. I don't want anything from you. I don't want to hear from you ever again.
This is actually so infuriating to me because so many people like myself have a parent that's absent in their lives, in my case, not having any relationship with my father, and would love to have somebody who actually wants to be in their life and be a positive force and would not care who they frickin' voted for. Like, we can talk about it respectfully if we disagree, or we can just not talk about it. But if somebody wants to otherwise be a positive and healthy relationship with you and just votes differently than you, cope. Be an adult. That's part of being an adult, is being able to interact with people whom you disagree and don't agree on every single little thing, and not be so triggered and have your fifis so upset that you can't even stand to speak to somebody who might dare disagree with your infinite political wisdom. It actually infuriates me because what you are taking for granted and depriving your grandchildren of is something so many of your fellow Americans have lost and would desperately love to have. It's disgusting.
Because I'm no longer safe being in a relationship with you. because I'm queer, I'm autistic, I'm like half disabled, I have Lyme disease and POTS and a bunch of other shit, and I'm bisexual, I have 2 daughters, and my husband's also bisexual. It's like,
Hold up. Somebody having a different political view than you doesn't make you unsafe. Get a grip. And what does having Lyme disease have to do with any of this? Also, I love how she's queer and bisexual. And I understand, like, bisexual people are valid and they are real. However, you're married to a man. So even if Trump were going to attack queer rights or whatever you think is going to happen, most of which isn't going to happen, it wouldn't really affect you, making this all the more hysterical and absurd.
I'm no longer safe with people like you. You'd be the first ones to turn me into the Schnazis if shit went down here.
Sorry, I actually had to step away and go answer the doorbell because my mom sent me crumble cookies for my birthday. And the lady who delivered them actually sang a song. It was really sweet and cute. Anyway, back to our friend here on TikTok.
So I just, to anyone in the comments that's going to say, oh my God, that's so terrible. The left is so hateful. You guys shouldn't be cutting off your family. You know what? I'm not going to go to Thanksgiving dinner with my family and look them in the eye and just play nice anymore. Like, I'm done doing this.
God forbid you act like an adult and just handle disagreements with people like a grown-up. I hate this so much, and I hate the fact that her whole comment section is just cheering on this toxicity. And she is not the only one. We've also got TikTokers from the LGBT community weighing in because this gay TikToker is disowning his parents because of politics.
I think one of the real kickers of all of this, one of the kickers, there are many kickers, it's the fact that so many of us have family members, moms, dads, sisters, brothers, who voted directly against us and what we stand for.
How? You're literally a gay man, and Trump is pro-gay marriage. Get a grip, cupcake. And yeah, they voted against what you stand for because they disagree with you. They're allowed to do that. You also voted against what they stand for, but they're not out here acting like you hate crimed them.
My parents, and probably the majority of my family, voted directly against me, my rights, and the rights of so many people that I care about. And I'm fucking sorry, but that's unfucking forgivable.
It's unforgivable that people dare disagree with you politically because you're just the most brilliant mind in the world, have everything figured out, and no good person could possibly come to a different conclusion than you on the most complex issues that divide society. Is even a hint of intellectual humility in the room with us? And again, they did not vote against you. You're just babbling nonsense. And they could just as easily say that by voting for somebody who wants gun control, you voted against their right to self-defense, their gun rights. You voted against the rights from their perspective of the unborn. You voted against the right to free speech. So many other ways. The rights to religious freedom, because Kamala and Joe want to crush a lot of religious freedom protections. All of that, they could say, you voted against our rights. It's almost like politics is about competing claims and interests. Get a grip and stop framing everyday disagreement as an attack on your humanity.
I can understand it in 2016. I can really, truly forgive that because Trump was new. Yes, he was racist and all this shit, but he was new and whatever. They knew what they were voting for this time.
Yeah. And for most people, it was a return to the 2016 to 2019 pre-COVID Trump era is what they were voting for. A time in which you as a gay man were not meaningfully harmed in any way. In fact, in June of 2020, your rights to anti-discrimination protections as a gay man were expanded by the Supreme Court while Trump was president by a Trump nominee, Justice Neil Gorsuch. Your victim card, it's getting declined, babe.
I haven't had the best relationship with my parents for like the majority of my life because of the, this thing. But I had a conversation with them the other day. I was like, what? Who are you voting for? I knew. I was just being nosy. I just wanted to know. And they said Trump, of course. And I said, do you know what that means for me? Do you know what that means for your son? The possibility of Project 2025 being implemented, LGBTQ plus protections being taken away, the possibility of the Supreme Court revisiting same-sex marriage and sending it back to the states and getting bans on it throughout so many of these conservative states where I couldn't travel to another state because my marriage might not be valid in that state.
Everything you just said is fact-free propaganda. The Supreme Court is not going to overturn overturn gay marriage. Only one justice has indicated a desire to do so, Clarence Thomas, and you would need 5. Multiple others, like Brett Kavanaugh, have specifically said they don't want to. And even if they did, your marriage and gay marriage would be protected by the Bipartisan Respect for Marriage Act that was passed while Biden was president. It would actually ensure that your marriage license would be respected in any state you went to. But you don't know any of those facts because you must get your news from woke LGBT TikTok rather than any actual source that covers the things happening. And again, with the Project 2025 thing, Trump has condemned that over and over again, and his own platform is different. He specifically had the anti-gay marriage language removed from the RNC platform. So you browbeat your parents with guilt and disinformation and tried to bully them into conforming to your ideological perspective. Yet we're supposed to think that you're the good guy here. Sure.
And they voted for him anyways. You cannot say you love someone, that you care for them, that you want them in your life, that you want to be a part of their lives, and vote for someone who is actively going to be working to take away their rights, to make their lives worse. Those two don't go hand in hand, and I'm so sorry. Actually, I'm not sorry. The actions of our conservative family members speak so much louder than the words they might tell us.
Of course, the biggest problem with this is that what you just said isn't true. They didn't do that. You're going to be just fine, sweetie. But more importantly, I find this especially maddening coming from woke gay men on the internet, because generations of gay men were disowned by their parents simply for being gay, thrown out of their homes, cut out of their families, discarded because of their sexuality. And they would have crawled through grass to have parents who love them and want to be in their lives and be connected with them. And they wouldn't have given 2 craps whether those parents still voted Republican. And yet you have the audacity to take your parents who actually want to be in your life for granted and discard them. The way that past generations of parents discarded their gay kids because you want to control their political worldview and they aren't buying your propaganda and victim script. It's so toxic. It's so sad. And it's so disgraceful. When you think about that dark history of how gay people were treated, that now we have gay people doing the opposite and rearing the ugly head of intolerance this movement was supposed to be against. This stuff, it actually makes me sad, guys. So do hit that like button to reward my suffering and do comment with your thoughts. Now, we'll wrap up today's show by reading a few of your comments from recent episodes. One person says, I think the 4B movement is a wonderful idea. I think that if any woman who is shallow and gullible enough to do that wants to do us all a favor and remove themselves from the dating pool, they have saved a guy from making the mistake of being attracted to or reproducing with them. Also, 4B is pro-life, because if you aren't having sex, you can't have an unwanted pregnancy. So go 4B. I get what you're going for here, but I disagree. I don't think any movement that encourages people to avoid love and family and relationships and the things that make life special is positive for those people. And I want what's best for them, so I don't support it. He continues, the same goes for anyone who cuts off their friendships based on how someone voted. If our relationship hung by such a thin thread, I doubt it was a healthy one. Now that would be true. I do agree with that, but I'd rather have those people reevaluate their priorities and become more open-minded and remain friends than cut people off. But I do agree, if they are that toxic and that close-minded, cutting you off is actually kind of doing you a favor. Another person writes, hi Brad, I've been watching your channel since YouTube miraculously recommended the last episode of your damage control podcast series about 2.5 months ago. I love how your videos constantly call out the insanity on both sides, planning to save this video to share with my other gay friends who are truly terrified of a second Trump presidency. Thanks, and please do that. And just so you know, guys, like, I've been mocking the left a lot lately because they're losing it over the election results, but I'm still going to push back on the right. And once Trump becomes president, if he does things I disagree with or think are wrong, I'm going to call it out on the show. And I appreciate you guys being open-minded and hearing me out. And I think we're building a really curious audience here. That's all I'm going for. I don't care if you're left or you're right. You just have to be curious and open-minded and want to discuss things in good faith and hear different perspectives. Another person writes, this is why it's so hard to find a good psychologist. Most of the ones I know are way too progressive, and if I'm having a political issue as a libertarian, they will be the ones having a meltdown if I mention voting for Trump, so I just talk to myself. That's sad. Yeah, I'm sure there are lots of great psychologists and therapists, and I've worked with a couple over the years myself that were great, but the ideological capture and just extreme bias of that industry is quite something, and it certainly leads to failings and shortcomings of patience sometimes. Another person writes, I'm deeply saddened for people who have believed the lies about what Trump is going to do. I can see that many of them are truly terrified about what their future holds, completely unnecessarily. It's truly disgusting, the amount of fear the Democrats and their proxies stoked for the sake of political gain. Yeah, I'm not going to stop laughing at them because it is funny. But I like I said, I do feel bad for these people. They've drunk the Kool-Aid and they've worked themselves up into this froth that's just not justified. So they're feeling all this unnecessary emotional distress. I do feel bad for them for that. Another person writes, LOL, I dare Brad to create an insanely woke character for himself and get interviews with those deranged reporters to see if you can spread some giga misinformation like that Trump will force gay people to get exercised or force them to go to straightening camps. I'll admit I'm a big fan of Sacha Baron Cohen's Ali G show era, though. That might be that part of me that's speaking right now. That would be funny, but I don't think I could ever do that kind of thing in good faith because I couldn't lie to people. I just couldn't do it. That's not me. Another person writes, I'm a server and I witnessed something very awkward yesterday. Names have been changed. Yesterday I served a large party. It was supposed to be 27, but there was a death in the family, so only 17 showed up after all. I understand. I'm sorry for their loss. That's not the point, but it is relevant. Anyway, this large party was to celebrate Ronald's 92nd birthday. So realistically, this could be his last birthday. Apparently, the family had been booking the room for Ronald's last birthday for the last several years, and he keeps going, so there's that. The first to arrive was one of Ronald's daughters, Nancy. She informed me that because of the death, that she expected a smaller turnout, and likely there was a chance that people would not be speaking to one another because of the election. Yes, really. Sure enough, they segregated into clearly the red table and the blue table. There was no intermingling across that boundary, except for a 30-something woman who went to sit down with Ronald for a few minutes, and a 60-something woman who went to sit with her grandchildren for a few minutes. Thank you for sharing this experience, and I am just horrified and heartbroken at this. Guys, we can't let this happen. We can't let politics tear our families apart. We've got to be bigger than that, be adults, and keep an open heart and an open mind, even when it's tough. This stuff makes me really sad. Another person writes, I love you, Brad. You are a truly good guy. I'm a Christian conservative for West Virginia, and I love watching you to get a break from Matt Walsh. I love him, but he is heartless. I love your content, but anyways, the meltdowns from the left is really showing the mental illnesses they have. They say us Republicans are the gun-loving crazy people, but I don't know, man. Seems like they are the actual crazy ones. By the way, your channel is grossly underrated. You should have Mr. Beast subscribers. LOL, don't ever change when you get big. Wow, I would love Mr. Beast level subscribers. That would be insane. I'd take 1/100th of that, but I don't think I will change, even if I do grow, because I'm a little too stubborn and stuck in my ways for that. Another person says, hi, Brad, sending love from the Great White North. I wish I could say this election craziness wasn't also happening up here in Canada, but I was recently told by a friend of nearly 20 years that he now considered me an unsafe person for my views and that we would no longer be in contact. Bruh, this safety thing. People need to stop. Disagreement doesn't endanger physical safety. For context, I'm a 5'5" Canadian, can't even vote in the States, LOL, by a woman who admittedly is glad Kamala isn't now the president-elect, but I guess the fact that I'm moderate to slightly right-leaning is still too far from acceptable behavior for them. I'm so sorry that people are like this, but honestly, people with that kind of attitude aren't fun to hang out with anyway, so maybe they spared you, and maybe they'll see the light someday and come back. I hope so for their sake, but yikes. Gosh, the unsafety thing kills me. Like, tell me you've never been in actual danger without telling me you've never been in actual danger. Ugh. All right, everybody, that's it for today's episode of the Brad vs. Everyone podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Please do make sure you're subscribed if you aren't yet, and do hit that like button before you go. Plus, leave a comment with your thoughts. I love hearing what you guys have to say, even when you roast me. And if you leave your comment with a super chat or a super thanks, I'll respond to it on tomorrow's episode. And with that, we'll talk again tomorrow.